short poetic, we'll try to reconstruct, because we don't have the original recording from the 1948, but we have some sketch of the music that was played by the string quartet and flute, and I just tried to reconstruct it and made arrangement for the musicians from the actually piano reduction. And we will present it together with an actor who will say the poems by Julian Tuwim, Słopiewnie. By the way, it's a cycle that also Karol Szymanowski wrote music to as well. And it will be interesting confrontation. Of course, Lutosławski's short pieces are more popular than Szymanowski's music. Szymanowski's cycle is one of the most modern pieces by him. It's a cycle for piano and voice. We will play the version for chamber ensemble, but it's very sophisticated and very poetic music. But it will be interesting confrontation, I think.
Lutosławski's song output includes a selection of children's songs. The Chain Festival features Lutosławski's music in a broader context. This year, several works by Grażyna Bacewicz are programmed in connection with 2 anniversaries.
We try to pay attention to those anniversaries. Grażyna Bacewicz was a very important composer, in my opinion, and we celebrate this year in January and February, actually, the 110th anniversary of her birth and 50th anniversary of the death of Grażyna Bacewicz. And I think it's a very good occasion to present some of her music, which is, I think, very, very interesting, very important, especially the music from the last period of her work.
Bauer is president of the Witold Lutosławski Society in Warsaw. I asked him about its main goals.
Lutosławski is, of course, very highly regarded as among musicians and music lovers who are interested in 20th century music. But I think that his presence in the consciousness of broader audience is still not as big as it should. So the main goal and main mission of the society is to popularize his music, to make Lutosławski as an artist, as a composer, to be present in the broader consciousness of the society, and to preserve his work and to try to present it in the different contexts, and just to develop the tradition of performing of his music as well, under the auspices of the society. I'm trying to create a chamber orchestra, chain ensemble that is devoted to contemporary music, and of course we play a lot of music by Lutosławski as well. And also try to educate, the ensemble tries to educate young artists, young musicians in performance of contemporary music.
Bauer frequently performs Lutosławski's music. He knew the composer well and has very fond memories of him.
I was fascinated by the music of Lutosławski a long time before we met in person, when I was lucky to have met Lutosławski when I was still a student, actually. And it was just like a fairy tale for me, because Lutosławski watched by accident on TV my recital, my live recital, and became somehow interested in my person and in what I'm doing, and wanted to help me, to support me a little bit. That was what he did on many occasions, actually. We don't know all about it, but he helped a lot of young people, young artists and composers, and people who needed medical treatment, complicated medical treatment that could not be done in Poland. So Lutosławski was financing traveling those people abroad, and helped to get good, proper medical care. And I was also one of the lucky young artists who got a support and scholarship from Maestro. And I studied in London for 2 years thanks to that scholarship.
That was at the very beginning of your career, but would you say that this was one of the turning points in your artistic development?
I would say so, yes. It was very important impulse in my development, contact with a highly, very important professor in England, William Pleath, teacher of Jacqueline Dupré, for instance, among others. And contact with Lutosławski, his inspiration and the chance that I could be on stage with Maestro. We played several times cello concerto together, which was a fantastic experience for me. It was very important impulse for me, both innerly and as seeing as a career impulse as well.
Our guest in focus today was the prominent cellist Andrzej Bauer. A festival devoted mostly to Lutosławski's music opens in Warsaw on Sunday, the 27th of January, and lasts until the 7th of February. It is the 16th edition of the annual Lutosławski Chain Festival. From me, Michał Kubicki, our host in focus, it's goodbye.
Language stream of Radio Poland, the external service of Polish radio, coming to you from Warsaw. Follow our 24-hour webcast on radiopoland.com.
Polish Radio External Service, brought to you by the World Radio Network. Find us on the web at wrn.org.
From Bangkok to Brussels, Adelaide to Anchorage, El Salvador to Edinburgh. Wherever you are in the world, you can hear award-winning feature programs, comprehensive news coverage, and much, much more on the World Radio Network. If you're connected to the internet, you can even listen to our programming whenever you like. Simply log on to wrn.org and start exploring a world of great radio.
This is Global Community Radio Channel 1, News and More. Portions rebroadcast on KFZR-LP, Fraser Park, KIEZ-LP, Monroe, KLQS-LP, Agua Dulce, KPDO, Pescadero, WLRI-LP, Gap, WMUU-LP, Madison, WRAQ-LP, Angelica, WXDR-LP, New Orleans, and WXIR-LP, Rochester.
This is the World Radio Network. Next, world news from Vatican Radio in Rome.
Vatican and World News.
In the headlines this Thursday, January the 24th, Pope Francis prepares to greet the young people of the world at the opening ceremony of the 34th World Youth Day in Panama. The Pope's message for the World Day of Social Communications is released, and in world news, the crisis in Venezuela deepens, with the US and Russia criticizing each other over the recognition of re-elected President Nicolas Maduro. In the Vatican, I'm Lydia O'Kane. Pope Francis has begun his first full day of engagements in Panama for the World Youth Day. A little earlier, the Pope travelled to the presidential palace where he paid a courtesy visit to the head of state, and at the moment he is meeting with local authorities and members of the diplomatic corps. After that encounter, Pope Francis will meet with the bishops of Central America. But the highlight of the day is the opening ceremony for this World Youth Day at the Campo Santa Maria de Antigua on the coastal belt of Panama City. Well, on the ground is Sean Patrick Lovett. Sean, during World Youth Days like this, there's always an important emphasis on catechesis. You've been out and about at these parish catechesis events. What can you tell us?
Lydia, our colleague Francesca Merlo and myself have just returned from the parish of Cristo Redentor, where there was a very exciting gathering of young people from the United States, Canada, from Zimbabwe, from Austria, but mostly from the Philippines, because the person leading the catechesis was the Cardinal Archbishop of Manila, Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle. We have an interview with him, and that will be available on our website later today. The most important thing about these catecheses is that they allow the people, the young people, to really get together and get to know one another. Concrete example, this morning, the animator of the group, the first thing was everybody get up and everybody make sure you're sitting next to someone you don't know, someone from a different country. Tell them who you are, where you come from, and why you're here. So it's a kind of mix of a social gathering, of a spiritual reflection. The theme today was Behold the Servant of the Lord. So Cardinal Tagle's catechesis, his teaching, was all about being at the service of others. But then there's lots of music and lots of photograph taking and lots of exchanging of gadgets, and it's a really fun occasion. It's a great place to be. The vibe is truly exciting. I'd rather be there than here, quite honestly, in the studio.
Well, Francesca, I'll turn to you. Later on is the main highlight of the day, the opening ceremony, which is usually extremely colourful and vibrant. What can we expect from this one?
Hi, Lydia. Honestly, I don't really know what to expect because everything here has just been so unexpected. The excitement is really contagious on the streets, and you don't expect to meet so many people from so many different countries just walking about and asking you questions about yourself. And so I'm really excited. I'm actually going with a group of pilgrims myself, a group of Peruvian pilgrims, and I'm looking forward to just meeting other people from all of the different countries around the world and getting their view on what we all have in common, which is this excitement and this passion to see Pope Francis and attend this opening ceremony. It's all very exciting, I must say.
Well, thanks for that, and we'll be hearing more from Sean Patrick Lovett and Francesca Merlo over the next few days. Well, amongst the pilgrims from all over the world visiting Panama for World Youth Day is the Alleluia band Malawi, who have come bearing gifts and sharing their music. Francesca Merlo has more on this story.
Every year for the past 7 years, Kostiwalo has represented Malawi at World Youth Days around the world, and every year he learns a lesson that he takes back to other young Catholics from the African continent. What Kos says he is particularly happy about is the fact that Panama seems even further away from his hometown in Europe. He's been to Italy numerous times, but it is the first time people of Panama will be able to experience our culture. Lessons given and lessons learned. It seems Kos loves to teach and loves to learn. Perhaps he has the love for teaching that every teacher should have, the kind that makes a student want to learn. And perhaps that is why 1 year ago, when Kostiwalo visited the Vatican with his African drum, Pope Francis asked Kos to teach him how to play African drums. This personal encounter Kos had with the Pope, he says, is what makes him always very happy to be here. Blessings, another young Malawian travelling with Kos, also loves the lessons that come from human interactions. His greatest memory so far is that he has interacted with so many people, emphasizing that it is in fact very, very important to interact with people, traveling, knowing each other, and exchanging ways of God so that we can improve our spiritual lives. These pilgrims exchange thoughts and feelings are not only the usual material memories, the gifts that the pilgrim tradition calls for. Their gift to me were 2 CDs of their own music. The music, so beautifully recorded by Alleluia Band Malawi, is yet another wonder that these young Malawians have brought to Panama. Young Africans wearing animal skins and carrying bows and arrows as they sing original African Catholic hymns is surely something new to the Panamanian stages and the thousands of pilgrims who have travelled from all around the world. Another day, another lesson. For Vatican News, I'm Francesca Merlo.
Pope Francis is urging a responsible use of the internet, saying it should be used to liberate and not entrap. His call comes in his annual message to mark the World Day of Social Communications, which was released today. Christopher Wells reports.
In his message, Pope Francis underlines that the internet and social media are an important resource. But he also emphasizes that the internet has been proven to be one of the areas most exposed to disinformation and to the conscious and targeted distortion of facts and interpersonal relationships, which are often used to discredit. Social networks, on the one hand, help us to better connect, rediscover, and assist one another, he says. But on the other hand, they lend themselves to the manipulation of personal data, aimed at obtaining political or economical advantages without due respect for the person and his rights. The net, observes the Pope, is an opportunity to promote encounter with others, but it can also increase our self-isolation, like a web that can entrap us. He notes in particular that young people are the ones most exposed to the illusion that the social web can completely satisfy them on a relational level. There's the dangerous phenomenon of young people becoming social hermits who risk alienating themselves completely from society. In today's world, Pope Francis underlines, all of us are called to invest in relationships and to affirm the interpersonal nature of our humanity, including in and through the network. The Church herself, remarks the Pope, is a network woven together by Eucharistic communion, where unity is based not on the likes, but on the truth, on the Amen, by which each one clings to the body of Christ and welcomes others. If a family, he says, uses the net to be more connected, to then meet at table and look into each other's eyes, then it is a resource. If a church community coordinates its activity through the network and then celebrates the Eucharist together, then it is a resource. The Pope concludes his message by saying that by acting responsibly to promote the positive use of the net, we can move from diagnosis to treatment, opening the way for dialogue, for encounter, for smiles and expressions of tenderness. This is the network we want, a network created not to entrap, but to liberate, to protect a communion of people who are free. I'm Christopher Wells.
Adrian Middledorp, Communications Director of Australia's Parramatta Diocese, is in Panama with a group of young Australians to participate in World Youth Day. He spoke to Sean Patrick Lovett about the theme of the Pope's message for the World Day of Social Communications.
I think the Pope would like to write this type of message, mainly because despite the connection that social media does provide on some level, there is an increasing amount of disconnect amongst young people because of social media. You see fights break out online, and where the human interactions, you can understand what the person means, you can understand their nuances and see the value in the one-on-one communication, that the interpersonal communication that social media just doesn't offer.
Turning to today's world news, and the crisis in Venezuela is deepening, with both the U.S. criticizing each other over the recognition of re-elected President Nicolas Maduro. James Blaers has more.
The war of words over Venezuela is intensifying. Moscow's condemning Washington for recognizing opposition leader Juan Guaido as Venezuela's interim president. As a result, Caracas has severed diplomatic relations with the United States. Nicolas Maduro, who was re-elected last May, with the opposition boycotting the process, has been inaugurated for a second 6 years term. He says the US is trying to topple him with a coup. Russia says the situation is sure to lead to violence and bloodshed. President Donald Trump's describing Maduro's rule as illegitimate. The country's economy is in ruins, with inflation running and ruining at almost 1,500%. Mexico, Bolivia, Cuba and Turkey, as well as Russia, are voicing support for Maduro, while France is calling for fresh elections. The situation's critical. President Maduro still retains the support of the military. This is the key to him holding on to power. For Vatican News, James Blaze reporting.
France's anti-government Yellow Vest protesters are to put forward a list of candidates to run in upcoming European Parliament elections. The protests, named after high-visibility vests French drivers are required to keep in their cars, started out in mid-November against fuel tax hikes that have since been scrapped. They quickly spiraled into a broader movement against the political elite and inequality, triggering some of the capital's worst street violence in decades. The movement, which so far has been loosely organised without a leadership structure, could take 13% of the vote in May, according to a poll. President Donald Trump said he is postponing his State of the Union address until the partial government shutdown ends, yielding after a week-long showdown with House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. He said he was not looking for an alternate option after Pelosi served notice earlier in the day that he wouldn't be allowed to deliver the address to a joint session of Congress next week. Pelosi had taken the step after Trump said he planned to show up in spite of Democratic objections to the speech taking place, which large swathes of the government shut down. Lawmakers handling Brexit for the European Parliament are urging British Prime Minister Theresa May to inform her EU partners how she plans to advance the deadlocked process and what she wants from them. The EU's Parliament Brexit Steering Group said on Thursday that it expects the UK side to come back as quickly as possible with a positive and viable proposal on the way forward. Turning to news from Africa, and Congo's President Felix Tshisekedi was sworn in as the country's new president today. The opposition leader took the oath and held up the national flag in celebration. He takes over from Joseph Kabila, who led the country since 2001. Questions remain about the disputed December 30th vote, but Congolese people largely have accepted his win in the interest of peace. And finally, that brings us to the end of this edition of Vatican and World News. For more on these and other stories, be sure to visit our web portal at www.vaticannews.va. Don't forget, we have all the latest stories from World Youth Day in Panama, including that opening ceremony we were talking about with Pope Francis presiding over that later on Thursday evening. You can also check out Twitter as well for all the latest news. Many thanks goes to our team in the studio in the Vatican. Thank you for joining us.
Vatican Radio, coming to you on the World Radio Network, on the web at WRN.org.
From Bangkok to Brussels, Adelaide to Anchorage, El Salvador to Edinburgh. Wherever you are in the world, you can hear award-winning feature programs, comprehensive news coverage, and much, much more on the World Radio Network. If you're connected...
It's 4:16 now at WLRI 93FM News Radio. Good morning in the newsroom. I'm Christian McLaughlin. 31 degrees outside, feels like 26. In a moment, we'll take a break and drop the stream for a little bit. We will return, for those of you listening online, we will return to this stream here a little bit later this morning. Have a little bit of computer maintenance to conduct here this morning before we get too far as the day is concerned, too far into it, that is. About 4:16 now is the time, and we will return after we get some maintenance taken care of. So thank you for joining us, and we will stream again very shortly. Stay with us.